So, good morning, good afternoon, and/or good evening to everybody who is on the call. I do appreciate all of you, making the time to come back. I always get a little bit, a little bit, queasy saying, so, okay, hey, we had a summer off. It's like, who's going to go ahead and show up? And when we come back, so I'm glad to see, many of you here on the call. So that's fantastic to go ahead and see. We do have a lot to cover today, coming back off of our summer hiatus. Probably the biggest thing, and as you'll see that we've kind of updated and reordered the agenda that we would normally go ahead and do, because I really want to go ahead and focus on the ITU cross-standardization updates that we just got. So many of you have likely seen the email from Jamie Clark, come to your OASIS. Come to you from OASIS, and we definitely want to be able to go ahead and go ahead and do that. And who's on the call? Who's got the waiting room? I see we got a large number of folks coming into the waiting room here. So
I actually don't see anyone in the waiting room,
unless I'm just behind. There we go. Okay, it looks like it's closing down now. And I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah.
All right, and I think Jamie, there we go. So the Jamie Clark, is that you joining in? Or possibly.
Jamie, I just texted Jamie. He says he's in the queue waiting to be let in.
All right, it looks like he just got
dialing from a 310 number. He said.
All right. Well, we'll get moving into here. So, again, so as you guys might all recall, says back in May, we as a TC passed a motion to go ahead and say, hey, yes, we want to go ahead and submit STIX and TAXI 2.1 to the ITU to go ahead and get cross approval for that, and have our standards become also ITU standards, global standards, done for a number of reasons. Primarily that we want to make sure that that we have that global view. It's easier for certain governmental agencies, NGOs, and like to go ahead and adopt an ITU standard versus an OASIS standard and the like, and really just open up the ability for our standards to be used on a much more global fashion. So we passed that motion at our May meeting on the 19th. And we followed the official process. So we submitted our official request to OASIS staff, in late May. We conducted a special majority vote to approve the submission to the OASIS president. So and that had passed. The review periods happened. Public day, call for comment happened, and nothing significant came in. And then, as we get to the bottom there, it says, the OASIS, submitted, so our board president, Gershon, he submitted it because at the time we didn't have an executive director. Although if you're paying attention to emails, actually that announcement just went out today, actually just a few minutes ago, that there is now an official executive director of OASIS. And so, but that got submitted, and we submitted our preliminary package over to the ITU on September 1st in time for their plenary sessions and reviews. So what's happened now? Well, many of you probably saw the note from Jamie that came out, and the ITU actually did respond back to OASIS. So there's a good news, bad news scenario here. Good news is that the ITU Study Group 17 has agreed that they will take up discussion of accepting STIX and TAXI as ITU standards. However, because there's concerns with the trademarks that are associated with STIX and TAXI, they're going to go ahead and actually adopt those as potentially as STIE and TAEII. And so, which is a mouthful to go ahead and say. I'm still trying to go ahead and get my head around all that. But what does that really mean for us as a TC? So I know a lot of us here have got long time history with the TC, but for those who don't, I'm going to go ahead and go down. I'm going to go ahead and go down memory lane a little bit and talk a little bit about some history. So when STIX and TAXI were brought into the OASIS fold back in 2015 or so, there was a an attempt to go ahead and get the trademarks around. So actually, United States Department of Homeland Security had put trademarks around the terms STIX and TAXI. And there was an attempt to go ahead and actually transfer those trademarks over to OASIS. However, they were unable to come to agreement when the things were coming. It was just more of an inertia thing, as I recall it, and we never got it quite done. It would have taken some more legal wrangling to go ahead and do, and we didn't want to delay the joining OASIS to be able to go ahead and kind of further the mission and really make STIX and TAXI part of the more proper global community. So the way this worked is normally when OASIS takes on a standards group, they want to make sure that they don't have any encumbered IPR or intellectual property rights. So basically, there are no third parties that challenge it. It is we follow under the the intellectual property requirements that OASIS meets around in terms of who owns what's submitted and as part of the standards and the like. All of you as different members have agreed to that. And that's part of our participation within OASIS. However, in the particular case of the trademarks, we ran into an issue that transfer couldn't happen in time. So what happened is that Department of Homeland Security actually granted a license to use the STIX and TAXI terms. It's a fairly generous usage license. And the OASIS board of directors accepted that license grant, and it's actually listed there at that URL. It is a special license grant for STIX and TAXI. But I think the key thing, and a lot of folks might not know this, is every single time we issue a revision of the standards. So when we did this with 1.1 and we went to 2.0 and then to 2.1, the OASIS board of directors need to explicitly waive the OASIS IPR rules and allow this license grant to occur. And this has not been an issue. It's almost, I don't want to quite call it a pro forma vote, but it is a formal vote that has to happen each and every time. It hasn't been an issue to this point. And when we were actually kind of bringing things in, we didn't actually think it was going to be that big of an issue because most of us felt that license grant was fairly broad and really didn't restrict anybody from doing anything. However, and we're continuing to go ahead and work with OASIS and our ITU liaison is Duncan Sparrow. And actually, before I go on to this one, Sean, I see you have your hand up, so let me go ahead and address your question now. If you
certainly, sorry about that. If I hadn't realized the next slide was this, or I would have waited to put my hand up.
Okay.
When it comes to appropriately, I was at the ITU meetings remotely and heard Russia's objections and other things, so I can add some more light to that when it's appropriate in your presentation. I apologize for interrupting early.
Oh no, that's quite all right, Sean. I do appreciate that.
But, guys, as long as you've lost your pace there, I don't know if Duncan was able to join us today because he was on vacation, but this is Jamie Clark, and I'm also here.
Okay, yeah, no, Duncan I knew wasn't going to be able to go ahead and make it today, so he might make it tonight, but he definitely wasn't going to make this the 11 a.m. session. So anyway, so coming back on it, so there were objections within the ITU to the trademark issues. It wasn't normal. Historically, ITU is not quite rubber stamped, but been very open with accepting OASIS standards as is and moving across. So we didn't think that there was going to be an issue. However, there is. And so we've got a couple of options in front of us to go ahead and kind of figure out. So right now, as Jamie outlined to the TC membership in his email, and also in conversations with myself and Trey and others, these are the options that we see on the table at the moment. So, and I think and I'll put some personal comments in here, but I definitely don't want to say that this is the official view of the TC until we actually have a broader discussion around this. So our options are: option A is basically to go ahead and negotiate with the original contributors, which is Department of Homeland Security and now CISA, about removing that trademark license restrictions, transferring it over to OASIS, so we don't have any third-party issues anymore. And I think that is probably the best option if we can go ahead and get to that point, because it clears everything up and free and clear. If we're not able to go ahead and do that, are we able to negotiate some sort of paring back of the license and make that acceptable to the ITU? We're not really sure if that approach is going to go ahead and address the ITU's concerns. And I think that's going to be a challenge. So I think that A and B require a fair amount of work and back and forth. I think A is the better outcome of the two. Option C is that we can go ahead and accept the study group's implied suggestion that, hey, go ahead and change the names, get rid of the trademark conflict. However, and I'll talk about that on another slide. Says, there is a bit of work that we have to do as a TC to get around it. So we would actually have to go through and make sure that, hey, changing STIX to STIE or STEI and TAEI, which besides the fact that they're tongue twisters, and what does that actually have to go ahead and do in terms of what's in the standards, the schemas, et cetera, and so forth. And then lastly, the last option would be to go ahead and actually withdraw our submission entirely. Jason, you have a question?
Not so much a question, but a comment. I've been thinking about this a little bit since I saw the emails, and in my opinion, we should kind of get started on C and then talk to CISA using that as part of the conversation around A, because the reality is, B is probably not workable, right? So it's going to be one or the other. And, CISA/DHS needs to understand that it's like, if they won't remove this trademark restriction, we're just going to have to rename everything and your trademark is useless, right? And nobody wants to go down that path. But, this has been going on for like 5 years now. And, that's just my opinion. Like, it would really be a shame if we had to rename these things. But at this point, it's kind of like we're in a rock and a hard place. That's my opinion.
I think you're channeling what my next slide is going to go ahead and be, but that's okay. Before I recognize Sean, I'm going to go ahead and jump to the next slide. And here's our now what slide. And I think this is in line with Jason, with what you're saying, is that I think, look, OASIS is working closely with DHS and CISA to go ahead and see if this transfer is possible, and that's the option A. And if not, hey, what can we go ahead and do to potentially simplify things, right? That's like, I do agree with Jason in that we need to solicit volunteers to work with the STIX and TAXI subcommittees now to understand what the impact of migration is. Looking at our normative language, our schema, and the like, to see the level of effort that needs to be go ahead and do. And I also agree that I don't think option D is the right approach. This is my personal opinion. I think it diminishes the value of STIX and TAXI long term, especially outside of the United States. Because I don't want it. This is not a U.S. only organization. It opens up a vacuum where other threat intel sharing standards can emerge potentially. Even with C, I think there's a diminishing of the brand equity that we've built up with STIX and TAXI over the last 10 or so years. So I don't want to see that go, but I think we have to be prepared, for that eventuality.
Well, the other thing, the third thing it does is that it makes the trademarks worthless.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing that needs to be, I think, clear. That we need to make sure Jamie is using in these negotiations, because the whole perspective is kind of like, we want to hold on to this thing, and it's like, if you continue to hold on to it, you're just holding something that won't be worth anything. So why are you doing that?
Yeah. Sean?
Hello there. So some background. I was not around when this first all kicked off, but something that has been told to me, so I'm hearing it second and third hand, is one of the reasons DHS at the time, which is now fallen to CISA, held on to it was because they wanted to ensure that it could spread and no one could then come back and say, oh, we're claiming this intellectual property right to impede it. So I think the fact that it's impeding should be the primary argument, because CISA, as near as I know, wasn't holding on for any financial or other things. They were holding on to it so that it wouldn't be impeded by someone else. That being said, I agree that A is probably the best option for getting it through. Option B, there has been cases before where a release, not a surrendering of IP, but a release of use kind of letter accompanied the submission to the ITU that the ITU has accepted to go through. And Jamie's got a couple samples and other things that we've looked at, and I think it's gone off to the lawyers for them to look at. So B may not be as difficult, but still CIS has got to sign off on that. There is, I don't want people to think that if we take C, it is a slam dunk. The concerns that were brought up were trademarked because the paper was marked with trademark, but the concerns centered around intellectual property being reserved at all. And if you follow that link to the OASIS DHS IP document, it talks, I'm not a lawyer, so maybe I'm misreading it, but the verbiage in there seems to go beyond trademarks to the intellectual property of the STIX standard and anything ever derived from that standard. So just going with option C may not satisfy Russia and the others now that they're going to have more time to dig into it. The impression that we also got was one of the things they were upset about was how late it got submitted. Even though we were allowed to submit it that late, they kind of felt they didn't have time to go over it in detail and actually didn't want this brought up at the February-March meeting because they didn't feel that they would have enough time between the January study group meeting and the February-March ITU meeting to go over the results of that. So I just want to make sure that we understand that caveat and that, we can just go with C and that will automatically fix everything and everything's guaranteed. It might, but it might not. But a big thing is to make sure we press forward on this in an expeditious manner so that those other countries have as much time as practicable to review the documents, because that was definitely something they even brought up at the, like I said, at the plenary closing ceremony, that they had issues with how late it was submitted. So that was
Sean
it.
And Rob, this is Jamie. Can I get in the queue?
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, that was all super helpful, and I agree with either all or 99% of both Rob's introduction and what Sean just said. Let me offer just a couple little tweaks on a couple of the factoids. Jason or somebody mentioned earlier that the OASIS board has to take a new approval every time a new version of STIX comes up. Hopefully you're happy with 2.1 for a while, so that'll be moot for it. But that's not the case. Actually, as of its last action, the board decided that it would give that permission for all future versions. So we don't have to go back to the board anymore. Your issue is not OASIS. We decided that we would publish the standard and find a way to live with the restrictions and take the position to implementers that it wasn't what we usually do, but it was good enough to be safe for implementers. But the customer here isn't, OASIS anymore, it's the ITU. And as Sean points out, some factions within the ITU. That's number one. Number two, I think Sean makes a very good point that this thing came in late in the day. The CTI-TC took a long time to decide whether they wanted to do this or not. And when you finally did adopt a resolution, which we're very grateful for. We sent it, but literally at the last possible minute. So we sent a note to the nice folks at ITU saying, hey, we'd like to send this in draft and then give you permission, finally on the last day when all our notice periods expire. So it really was coming in the window at the last minute. And that's unfortunate. And if I was any legitimate other participant, I probably also would be saying, hey, what is this thing coming in here the day before the meeting? And then we get another one the last day of the meeting. So, they are, there's nothing suspicious about the fact that they're saying we need some time on this. That isn't hostility. That's a natural reaction. And then finally, I want to say my understanding, and I am a lawyer, I'm OASIS's lawyer, of the situation with options 1 and 2 are, as Jason said and Rob said, my understanding of the situation with option 3 is that, as Sean suggested, there's more to that license than just a simple trademark claim, and we think we'd have to work somehow with CISA to even use option 3 because they made the decision to tie up the work in extraordinary ways we don't normally allow, and we made the decision to tolerate that. If that kills it with ITU, well, it's kind of going to be on them, not us, but we will have to negotiate in any of those cases. And I should say, by and large, OASIS is having those conversations with the department, largely through legal counsel, as we usually do, and as our conversations are with all of you. If we're talking with one member about their contributions or their licenses or their issues, that's not necessarily a public conversation. But yeah, we do need to talk to them about any of those issues, including number 3. And so what we're hoping for from this meeting, at least as a start, is you guys will create a process for reaching an opinion about what you'd like to see. And maybe you don't have that at this meeting. Maybe you need a little bit more huddle to have that decision. But then once we get that tip from you, that will guide us in trying to negotiate out a solution, which we hope to be able to send back to ITU after talking to DHS well before their next meeting, so that we can all maybe get on the same page. Okay, thanks for tolerating that. That's the pitch. I'm in an airport, so apologies for the noise, and I'm around a little bit for questions if you need anything from me.
All right. Thank you, Jamie. Jason, your hand is still up. Did you have anything else?
Oh, no, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. So from a timeline perspective, and actually getting to the point of kind of what Jamie was saying towards the end there. So I said, look, says, if you went through and looked at the letter the ITU sent back, says, they've indicated they're going to take up, STIE and TAE at their next work sessions in March. Duncan Sparrow and Michael Rosa are the designated editors for STIX and TAXI. So I'm just going to use the old words because I can't get my heads around those acronyms, respectively. However, and I think the important thing is we as a TC cannot stay idle until then. There is a very clear, directive, or should I say strongly worded suggestion in the ITU letter that they would like to get updates from us by the end of this year to make sure that when they meet in February to go ahead and figure out their planning sessions for March, that we have moved in the right direction. To Jamie's point, we absolutely need to be working on the legal solutions, again, the options A and B, in parallel with working on option C. I think we need to go ahead and actually, put together a team of people to be able to go ahead and start looking at the standards, seeing what it would go ahead and take to be able to go ahead and make the changes. And anything else, the usage and IPR issues aside, because that's why these have to happen in tandem. And be able to go ahead and do this. And ideally, we've got something that we can say, hey, we're pretty comfortable with, in the late October, early November timeframe. As a TC, even if it's not 100% finished, if we have something and a path to be able to go ahead and get there by year end or so, I think that's something that we can go ahead and transmit. I see Sean, you had your hand up and then followed by Rich.
Just for clarity, that March session for Study Group 17 actually begins in February. It starts at the end of February and then extends into March. And the question group, basically similar to our STIX subcommittee, the subcommittee for Study Group 17 that's handling STIX and a few other things, has a virtual meeting that I believe is actually in January, not February, in preps for that February-March meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, if
the other timelines here, I think are. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they've asked us to answer before January because they're going to be cooking immediately on the new year, and they've asked us to try and work it out with them by email before year end, which is a practical matter means before the holidays vaporize everybody. So yeah, it's a little tighter time schedule than you thought.
Yep. So I just wanted to clarify the timelines here because everyone talks about like it's the March meeting, which implies several weeks that aren't actually there.
I agree. I agree, Sean. Rich?
So this is a simple question. Why is it, what is the work beyond just going into the documents and doing a global replace of STIX to STIE? Am I missing something? I mean, obviously.
Well, sorry, what happens if you've implemented and we have to change it in the schema? and now you have to change your parser. So all the prefixes that would have like the STIX something, now it's a STI.
We also have headers and the like defined for HTTP, for taxi, and other similar bits of fun.
True. So
Okay.
it's not just a search and replace in the normative text. It's bigger than that. What do we do about the libraries, you know? There are a lot of folks relying on this stuff.
Good points.
You'd basically, I mean, you wouldn't be able to get rid of the other ones. You'd basically have to have the ITU flavor and the DHS flavor, at least for some period of time.
It should almost be like forking STIX.
That's actually kind of what I was raising my hand on, because like you said, it's not just the document, then it's the GitHub, it's the FAQs, it's everything. On the surface and in the presentation, it's really just go, oh, we'll just cross off STIX and put an STIE in the submission. But I think if we're really going down path C, I actually think that that's more work than A and B. And if I understood Jamie's looking for an answer out of this group, as in a formal recommendation of how we want OASIS to proceed. And to that end, I would think that we should submit up those three options, or those 4 steps, saying this is how we want OASIS to proceed. Our first choice is to get CISA to offer a full release. Our second choice is for the OASIS and CISA lawyers to look at those sample letters that the ITU presented us and draft something similar or even more permissive that we can take back to the ITU. And our third choice, failing those, is C, where we do a replace, but even that's got to require CISA's lawyers buy off. And then we send that up as a formal recommendation to OASIS and the lawyers so that they can point to it as they continue their work. If I understood Jamie's request correctly.
This is Jamie. Can I just rip on that a little bit? Ideally, the minimum what we'd like to get back for you guys as the CTI-TC, ideally by October would be my suggestion, but you need to decide your own process for this, is a statement kind of like this. We prefer number X, and if we can't have number X, then we prefer number Y. And we think number Z is, a mess, and we don't think we should go there, and we should only consider it if we can't do the other two. And we prefer X to Y, and here are our concerns. And then that is something we can take and also work with the department on and get their take. But I think it will be more helpful to them in making their decision about how much they can confidently give up if they know what your intent is and what you believe you'll have to do if you can't lift the trademark claim that is currently the obstacle. So a ranked prioritization of the 4 options. Any 5th option, if you got any creative people out there.
If I may,
you can make about, yeah, that's what we're looking for. Thank you.
So I don't think any of us want to fork STIX or create an appearance of forking STIX or undermine the tremendous amount of communication and public outreach that we've all done. I think here the issue is that we have to try to hack a large government bureaucracy, and nobody wants to rename STIX and taxi, but if as a TC we could draft a firmly worded letter describing like the outcome that like to DHS legal, like either you let go, and modify the license and trademark situation such that we can move forward, or, we're going to have no choice but to go down this really nasty path. And we can talk about how that would undermine, all the information sharing initiatives over the years, etc. But I think nobody wants option C, but it is perhaps our best tool to focus the minds of perhaps obstreperous legal counsel or so forth. Am I talking out of school here?
So
Jamie, in fairness to, just hold on. In fairness to the obstreperous legal counsel, myself included, you know what? We're not talking about trying to hack DHS. We're talking about trying to hack DHS and ITU. You know, we got to find something everybody can live with here.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
neither
I
of them is
spoke-
being that
I'm
easy
sorry,
as
I'm
well.
tired.
Yeah. So Jamie, do you need us to draft a formal letter, or would a resolution from us saying we vastly prefer and recommend option A, failing option A, option B in line or even more permissive than the samples given? We have grave concerns about C, forcing a fork and causing massive issues, and we'd all like to avoid option 4. Is that statement sufficient for you, or do we need to write a letter expanding out on that for you?
That would be fine, but I call to your attention that this is just first explained to the committee today, and you have some members who are not present. And speaking as an OASIS guy, I'd like to see someone, you know, write that up, circulate it around, and have a chance for the people on the committee to comment and think about it before you adopt it.
Okay, I was just thinking of timelines, because if it's not adopted at today's meetings, then we're looking at you not having that until the end of next month.
We
so-
we could call a special TC meeting. We could decide here today that, like, in 2 weeks' time, for example, we're going to have another TC meeting and set up a Tiger team in the interim to draft that document, and then have as the sole agenda item in 2 weeks' time to pass that through. It's not like we're, you know, our feet are in quicksand and we can't
Then
do anything
that's
until
Or
October.
if you believe you've got a sense of the meeting today, adopt a resolution saying that our preliminary belief is X, but we're going to discuss it, refine it, and commit it to a Tiger team over the course of the next 2 weeks, and post our final conclusions to TC or something. I'm not saying don't take action today. I'm just saying, you know, be generous in including others.
that sounds great to me. I don't want to cut off Jason because I know he's got his hands up. But if no one has any objections, I would move that we adopt that resolution and say that we will set up a Tiger team and represent it at a special meeting in 2 weeks to adopt such a letter to send out.
Okay, so before I lose the thought and for Kelly's benefit, so I am hearing a motion on the table to go ahead and basically call a TC meeting in 2 weeks and have a Tiger team in the meantime. Is that correct, Sean?
So Roy, can I comment on that before we vote on the motion?
I agree. Yes, so I'll make sure
Yes.
I want to make sure I heard Sean correctly.
Not quite. I was recommending that in today's meeting and tonight's meeting, we adopt a preliminary resolution that those 4 options in that order is our preference. And the Tiger team should take that as direction to draft a more formal letter for us to vote on and approve to send off at the meeting in 2 weeks. Does that make sense? So it's not just Tiger team go forth, it's here's our priorities, Tiger team take that and go forth. But I definitely didn't want to cut off discussion.
No.
Guys, this is Jamie. This makes sense to me, but let me mention, you may also want in your motion to say that if there's any problem with a quorum in a meeting in 2 weeks, you reserve the right to have the chair start a ballot to approve a statement. If you have a statement in 2 weeks, but not a meeting.
I have
So you're
no
not waiting
objections.
for a month.
I have no objections to that amendment to my motion. But I know Jason had a comment.
Yeah,
I saw Marlon.
Oh,
Jason, you're first, and then Marlon, if he still wants to go.
okay. So a couple of comments. So first comment, similar to what Jamie was saying, I guess. So let's not forget we have electronic ballots, and I would suggest that this is important enough of an issue, and it's going to have an enormous potential impact to whatever we do, that the ballot should actually go out before this Tiger team to get a real understanding of the TC, which of these 4 things and in what order people want them to proceed. Because I'll be honest, I actually don't think there's been enough discussion around option 4. And I am very undecided. Like, to me, if it comes down to we either do this gigantic fork or we withdraw the ITU submission, I'm very unclear, right? Like, is it worth going through all that just to go through the ITU? I don't know. And I think that a lot of TC members might have different opinions about that, right? So I think that we need to make sure that it's balloted properly before this, Tiger team or whatever creates this letter. Because otherwise you're going to create a letter and it's going to go out for a vote, and it might get voted down anyways because people don't agree with what the ordering in the letter. So that's my main comment. And I would like to understand, to help with that decision, right? For those of us who are not as familiar with the ITU, like, I think that there needs to be a clear breakdown, like what are the benefits that are expected to come out of STIX-TAXI being ratified by the ITU, because we're talking about a huge potential, like enormous impact on the industry if we create this fork, right? So the benefits have to outweigh that cost.
So
that's my comment.
What I heard is that there is a competing standard out of China, which would then supplant STIX as the cyber threat intelligence interchange format in the ITU's work group. Sean, or somebody who knows more about that, help us understand the downside if we withdraw the submission, please.
Like, yeah, I would need more understanding that, because that to me that communicates nothing. So like, if China creates a new standard and China and Russia decide to go use it and no one else in the world uses it, honestly, I don't care.
Okay, so first, to the best of my knowledge, China has not proposed a new standard. At the ITU, China did propose a standard, which I believe moved forward and was adopted, for the sharing of cybersecurity threats, specifically in relation to automotive vehicles. However, that standard was more of, here are things that any such sharing needs to, one, we need to come to an agreement, we have to do it. Sharing should include this information, sharing should include this kind of vetting. Sharing will require people to set up communities of interest, and those communities of interest have to decide how they share. That submission actually referenced TAXI and therefore implied STIX. So that was not actually competing standard. There might be some other competing standard out there that I don't know about, but I think that's where that train came from, because we were scrambling to read and understand that standard when we saw it and saw the title of it. As far as benefits, the ITU is part of the United Nations. If they adopt it and it goes through this two-step process, they will then pay and cover the good translations and pushing it out, which if the UN adopts it, that further pushes for global adoption and encourages businesses, organizations to make tools and other things that facilitate the standard and its use. Is it absolutely required for its use? I don't think so. But I mean, that's a pretty big, in essence, PR vehicle and push if that's the standard that the United Nations has agrees should be used for sharing this information. I am fairly new to the ITU myself, so I can't go into and give you detailed information. Duncan would be a better person for that, or Marlon, I think he said he was on here, has attended more meetings than I have there. But at this time, to the best of my knowledge, there's not a competing standard this exact moment. That doesn't mean one won't come up. I know the ITU works, from what I've been told, works very hard that once they've adopted a standard, they don't then adopt competing standards later. Instead, what they would do is they'd have to come back to us to get the standard we have modified, which goes a long way for global standardization.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sean.
Not a problem.
So I think where we are now is I mean, so we clearly need to have much more discussion around this. we're not going to resolve anything on this call today. My personal feeling is I think it'd be premature, other than to agree to talk further around what our options need to go ahead and be. So that way we're not making a hasty decision. I also want to go ahead and give folks who weren't able to go ahead and make this, this call here, an option to go ahead and, and hear this out, and, go ahead and, watch the video, hear through the discussions that have already been happening. What we will go ahead and do, is I think, again, there, so as Sean did have a motion on the table to go ahead and say, at least say, hey, let's go ahead and document what we think the options are, push that out to the membership, and say that we were going to have a special meeting, in say, for example, 2 weeks time, to be able to go ahead and further, while we're working in the interim on making sure that we've got everyone's voices heard. Is there a second to that motion?
If I might amend my motion,
Please.
I'd like to amend that to that we empower the Tiger team should they feel it's appropriate, and per what has already been brought up, for them to reach out and trigger electronic balloting on rank preference orders and other things to help inform their work leading up to that. I don't know if that's allowed by the OASIS rules, but that way they can craft verbiage and get that out for people to look at.
I'm not sure if Kavi can do ranked choice, but something to think through. Trey?
Jason, do you still have your hand up? Okay. So I just have this. I don't know everything. I'm a beginner at a lot of things. I am in Davos, Switzerland right now. I'm going to be in Geneva Monday, Tuesday, and I think Saturday afternoon, I'm supposed to be having like a 3-hour extended lunch meeting with the first board of directors and folks from the ITUT. And I've talked to Jamie and Rob, you've been part of that discussion, and it sounds like, there's not really much that can be done from Switzerland, that it all hinges on like remote work group people. But like with this wider quorum of the TC, like it's just uncannily coincidental that I'll be meeting with the ITUT like in 2 or 3 days. If there's some kind of subtle track that I can pursue, or some good questions that I could ask them that might get another option on the table, please reach out, DM me or whatever, let me know. I'll do my best.
Okay. All right. I'm trying to go ahead and also kind of keep an eye on the clock as well. So is there a second for Sean's motion?
Hey, Rob, can I just clarify the motion so we know what we're asking for a second for, just to make sure?
Yes, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, so Sean's motion with his 2 adoptions are to adopt a preliminary resolution with the 4 options, to put the 4 options in rank order, with giving this an empower a Tiger team as they feel appropriate to reach out with additions to those 4 options, or any questions to the TC about those 4 options, to call a meeting in the near future to discuss this, but also have the co-chairs reserve a right to open a ballot on what the Tiger team produces should a meeting not be able to be assembled in the very near future. Did I get it all?
Very close. Let me actually.
Jamie, it's up to you guys, but it sounded pretty good to me.
Yeah,
I can see the language. I just want to make sure I got like the main points.
That was kind of the main points. I can try to type something up. I am and then post it if that makes things easier to do. But yeah, that was it. It was, as Jamie had mentioned, the possibility of electronic balloting. And Jason had mentioned his concerns that some of people need to think about it. So it was let me try to rephrase this more cleanly. I am proposing that a Tiger team be set up to present a letter or proposal in 2 weeks' time at a special session for this group to adopt, reject, amend. In that time, the Tiger team's empowered to set up an electronic balloting or voting, to poll the membership about these choices to ensure that the letter that they present is in line with the TC's feelings as a whole, whether that's rank voting on those 4 options for them, or if they come up with some other ballot questions, they're empowered to do that and send it out so we can move quickly, versus them coming up with questions and then 2 weeks time, we gather more questions and then have another 2-week cycle. Does that make sense? So Tiger team to draft something in over the next 2 weeks for vote. Tiger team is empowered to trigger some electronic balloting to ensure that what they're drafting is in line with what the TC desires. Is that clear enough?
I got
Is
that.
the audience,
And I would
is
say
the audience
if you're-
DHS, Sean? Are we writing a letter to DHS? Are we writing a letter to the world?
No,
Are we
you're-
writing?
I
you're-
believe
no,
we're writing a
you're-
letter
you're-
to Jamie and OASIS
Okay.
lawyers so that they
Okay.
have clear guidance of what this committee's intent and desires are. As in,
That's right.
the,
This
the
is
amount of
Jamie.
work
And
is
let me say
irrelevant.
also-
We want option A. Failing option A, we want option B. I think we're kind of all on the same page. That for those next 2 is where I think it gets really muddy. Hence why the Tiger team should be empowered to poll people and get a formal recorded vote if need be, if they feel it's needed.
Rob, may I mention 2 other things?
Please.
One is, it may be that you want to also poll and come up with some statements around why you think it's a good idea or bad idea. You know, for example, option C has some edges on it. And if people want to try and assemble a statement that says, we think this would work, we think this is a bad option, but we'll take it if we can get it. We think there are some difficulties. Here are those difficulties. Here's what we're worried about. You know, anything that can help everybody evaluate which way to go with those options, including DHS, and your opinion
Yeah.
will be helpful. Second, if you do have I'm sorry. Second, if you do have a meeting in 2 weeks and you have a quorum issue, I'd appreciate it if you could reserve the right to start a final ballot by this TC on a remote basis to approve what the Tiger team does or reject it if a meeting doesn't occur, because we don't want to wait a whole other month if we can avoid it. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
And thank you very much. That was the intent, is to try to give that Tiger team as much flexibility as necessary to reach out to Jamie and others to ensure the verbiage and the guidance that gets sent up meets the needs of OASIS and the OASIS lawyers and such, versus us possibly going down the wrong route.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put a close to that for now. It says, okay, so, Sean's motion is on the table. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. The motion has been made and is seconded. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and just do a quick, a hand vote. So all in favor of the motion as stated, go ahead and raise your hand. And keep your hands up until we tell you to put them down.
Hey, Kelly, if you're counting, I can't raise my hand for some reason.
And Kelly, let us know when you're done with the count.
So my count is 15, actually with Trey 16 in favor, 8 not, but let me do that one more time. I just want to make sure I got it.
So we got also Chris Ricard and Emily and I. So that puts it at what, 18?
Yes, we have 18 in favor.
Okay. All right. And all right. So everyone, if you have that, everyone go ahead and drop your hands. And we'll go ahead and to go ahead and make sure we're very, very clear. If you are not in favor of the motion as standard, go ahead and raise your hand now if you are not in favor. Okay, based on what I'm seeing right now, it appears, this motion carries for at least this session here. Because I don't want to make any assumptions around quorum or anything like that. Until I let Kelly actually go ahead and crunch the numbers. So we will go ahead and raise the same motion at the session tonight to go ahead and get anyone who's attending tonight to be able to go ahead and get that out there. And then if it carries through like I expect it will, that we will go ahead and have communications out within the next day or so to be able to go ahead and get that Tiger team. If you are interested in serving on said Tiger team, please reach out to myself, Trey, Kelly, or anybody and let us know. And don't hesitate to go ahead and start the conversations on the listserv or in Slack to go ahead and get conversations started. I think the important piece out of this is not only to go ahead and get a clear sense of what the TC wants, but also to be able to provide enough context so that as Jamie and OASIS are going through and having their conversations, they can go ahead and adequately represent us as their role. Okay.
That's super, and thank you very much, guys, for grappling with this quickly. This is Jamie. I'm going to sign off after this. Let me just say, to be very clear, OASIS and its staff and its board, while we reserve some rights to do something if catastrophe occurs, the fact is we're the monkey. You guys are the organ grinders. We're trying to, as best we can, put into place within our rules what you want. So getting a clear expression of what you want will be very helpful.
And we will work to go ahead and get that done quickly. So you have that clear definition from us. So thank you for joining the call, Jamie. I appreciate that. All right. So I kind of figured we were going to spend most of our time on this, so I don't want to go ahead and give anybody short shrift. We have a few minutes left. I will call it now. Jeff Mates, we're going to go ahead and cut you for time today. I'm sorry.
No worries. I wasn't sure if I was even going to do this today. That's why I did the follow-up. So thank you.
So I feel like a talk show host says, oh, and we're just not going to go ahead and get to you. Got to cut you for time. So let's go ahead and do a couple quick things here. So with that, there's still a couple of open TC leadership roles, and given the whole conversation that we had, definitely, I think, Kelly would like some help from a secretary's position to go ahead and be able to go ahead and take accurate notes and helped us to go ahead and kind of corral all of this. There's a lot going to be happening over the course. So this is a great opportunity to go ahead and get involved. And if we do go down the road of actually having to go ahead and modifying or forking the standards, I think, Emily and Christian will very much welcome actually a taxi co-chair to be able to go ahead and actually go ahead and do the work help lead the work that's necessary there, instead of putting the burden all on the STIX subcommittee at this point. So please let us know. Emily, anything quickly, if you're still on the call, says any quick updates you want to go ahead and highlight here? I don't want to rush anybody, but I also realize we've got about 4 minutes left.
Right. So the most important thing I want to do is to have a voice vote to publish best practices as a committee note. We've mentioned it many times here this year on the call as we were developing STIX 2.1. There were a lot of places where we said, oh, this doesn't belong in the specification. It's more of a best practice. And Rich and others collected all of those best practices, wrote the document, spent many weeks reviewing with the STIX working group. Jeff Mates contributed additional best practices, and it's ready to publish now. It's been ready to publish for a couple of months, but we've had a few difficulties. And the recommendation was to do a voice vote if we had quorum here on this call today. And so that's what I would like to request. We can ignore the rest of this, but just if we can, in these last few minutes, do a voice vote to publish the STIX best practices as a committee note, I'd appreciate that.
All right. So we'll go back to it. If you are in favor of publishing the best practices document as a committee note, please go ahead and raise your hand.
Any last votes out there? I'm gonna go ahead and call it here in a second, please.
So we have Trey and I who can't raise our hands, but posted in chat that our hands are raised. So I'm showing 16 hands plus 2.
Great, and we have achieved quorum with just the members on this call, but we will of course do it with the evening call as well. And we can share all the numbers after.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think if we have quorum here in 18, this is, I mean, I think that should be enough, but we will also go ahead and raise this on the call tonight as well to make sure that we get the get the full representation. So thank you for doing the vote. I appreciate that. And thank you, Emily. And then Marlon or Kartikey, any quick highlights that you want to go ahead and address here?
Yeah.
Kartikey? Yeah.
Yeah, the Plugfest was great. There were 2 parts to it. Overall, we all learned a lot, both from the interoperability standard perspective, and the participants learned a lot, and they made various improvements to their products during the Plugfest. So next slide, please. Yeah, so there are 2 parts. One, and the second part is for taxi. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here's the various lessons learned. There's a good amount of them. And again, there was lessons learned from our perspective, from the TC and subcommittee perspective, but also from participants. Next slide, please. Yeah, looking forward, we're looking to have more Plugfest. Definitely would recommend 10 out of 10. And we're also looking to make more automated test suites to help improve the whole thing, and potentially allow people to test their products outside of a formal Plugfest. And OASIS is going to socialize. We created a recap document of the Plugfest with various details and stuff. So the OASIS is working on socializing that. Marlon, did you want to say anything else?
No, you got it. Thanks, Kartikey.
All right. All right. So and again, apologies to Jeff. We were going to go ahead and talk about actually using STIX in the malware configuration parser from DC3, but we will reschedule this for another time. Because I still do want to go ahead and see this. So that's, so there's still interest in that. Are there any last questions from anybody or open things that we want to go ahead and address in the last couple minutes here? Hearing none, I will say thank you for joining. Do appreciate all of the great conversation here today. Sean, Jason, everyone who's been here. I mean, we've got a lot of work to go ahead and do over the next several weeks. Get to go ahead and get some of these issues resolved. And I look forward to working on it. We'll be reaching out to all of you. So I appreciate everyone's involvement here. And if you have the cycles to be able to go ahead and either sit in as a co-secretary or a taxi chair, please let us know, because those roles will become very important over the course of the next several weeks. With that, I will go ahead and release you all to your other actual obligations. And thank you for joining today.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for other
right?
meetings.
All right. Thanks, everybody.